She had been with the family for 3 years, a quiet constant in a house that never slept. The mansion sat behind high hedges and iron gates on a street where maple trees softened the winter wind. To neighbors it was an emblem of success. Manicured lawns, a driveway with 2 cars, holiday lights that never failed to impress. To the family she was simply the maid, Elena, who kept rooms tidy, folded clothes into neat piles, and wrapped children's lunches in wax paper. To the children she was a trusted presence, the one who listened when grown-ups were busy. Elena's life had not been straightforward. She had left a small town years ago with an older sister, chasing steady work and a chance at something that looked like a quiet home. She had learned the rhythms of houses, how grief leaks into rooms, how laughter can keep its distance, how small signs can mean large things. When she first started with this family, James's charm had been easy to mistake for goodness. He brought flowers sometimes, praised her cooking, and always seemed amused in gentle ways. That ease made his private self harder to suspect. On a grey Thursday morning the younger boy, 9, had a cough and a flushed cheek. The mother had left earlier for a business trip. James kissed the children and promised the boy he'd take him to a clinic after work. "Daddy said it wouldn't hurt," the boy murmured as he tugged a blanket around his legs. Elena noticed a pale crescent near his wrist and, at first, assumed it was a scrape from a tumble at the playground. By late morning the cough had worsened. Elena wrapped him in a blanket and checked a small bruise along his collarbone that hadn't been there before. Her hands, which had scrubbed stains and folded sheets for years, trembled a little. A bruise from a fall looks different than a bruise from pressure. This one showed the outline of a grip. She had seen such marks once before, in a house where a child's fear had been dismissed as clumsy play. James texted that he'd be late. When he returned that night, he offered apologies and soft reassurances. "He fell," he said easily. "It's nothing. Kids get into scrapes." He smoothed his son's hair and gave a laugh that didn't reach his eyes. Elena accepted the explanation outwardly. She kept the domestic calm her job required, but inside she kept watch. She sat with the boy until salt sleep took him and checked the marks again. They'd darkened and new ones had started to bloom beneath the collar. The next morning Elena knelt beside him and asked gently, "Tell me everything." He was small and secretive in his replies, fingers worrying a stuffed rabbit. "We were playing doctors," he said at last, voice thin. "Daddy said it would make me brave. He said it wouldn't hurt." The words landed like a stone in her chest. For a moment she felt suspended between disbelief and the need to act. There are moments when the world asks a person to act before they're ready. Elena drew on a steadiness built from years of holding other people's lives without fuss. She thought through options: call the mother, bring him to a clinic, confront the father. But time mattered. A bruise could heal into a story the doctors couldn't read, or the memory could start to blur. She found an old crisis line number in her phone's notes and dialed, then dialed 911. She described what she had seen and relayed the boy's words. The dispatcher asked detailed questions and Elena answered, keeping her voice calm so the child would not be frightened further. Officers arrived within the hour. They moved with quiet efficiency, respectful but focused. They introduced themselves and spoke to the family with the practiced tone of people who had seen both denials and confessions. James came home to strangers in his kitchen and offered a practiced dismay. "What is this about?" he asked. When questioned, his version of events stiffened into a tidy story. An afternoon tumble, a bandage applied, nothing more. The officers had patience for rehearsed lines. They asked the boy to show where it hurt and watched how he reacted, the way his finger hovered, the slight recoil when asked to touch the bruise. A medical team that arrived later examined the child and found patterns inconsistent with a single accident. A bruise shaped like a crescent could correspond to an intentional hold. The doctor used words Elena would later learn to understand: repeated injury, pattern of control, non-accidental trauma. James' reaction shifted when a clinician used clinical terms. He became defensive, clipped in speech. He offered a story, discipline that got out of hand, a role play that went wrong, but his answers did not align with the child's account or the marks that told their own factual tale. The officers made the decision nobody wants to make. They detained him for questioning. He protested loudly about being misunderstood and about the family's reputation. The arrest was quiet and ordinary. Handcuffs, a paper exchanged, the click of a door. After he was taken, the household changed. The mother returned, and the house filled with a brittle confusion. There were calls to lawyers, whispers from neighbors, and sudden interest from people who had never cared for the family's privacy. Elena felt the sting of blame from some relatives who said she had acted too quickly. Others sent quiet thanks. Rescue, she learned, can be messy. It can save and it can tear. The boy was placed temporarily with an aunt while social services and investigators did their work. Elena continued to do her job, though each shirt she folded carried new intent. Routines can anchor a child who has learned not to trust his body. The mother moved with stunned urgency, her apologies and anger mixed as she tried to understand the double life her marriage had held. In therapy, the boy began, haltingly, to put words to the things that had been lodged inside him. The court process was exhausting. Elena sat under bright lights and recounted details she had first thought trivial. A text sent at a certain hour, a joke the father used to cover a bruise, the boy's habit of avoiding the word hurt. She watched jurors listen to medical reports and small voices. The father's defense argued about discipline and intent. The prosecution presented patterns and testimony. When the verdict arrived, it did not erase the past, but it affirmed that the child's pain was real and that someone would be held accountable. Neighbors who had once admired the house now spoke in hushed tones. Some avoided Elena for fear of involvement, others offered quiet support. When James was convicted of child endangerment and abuse, the sentence was a measure of years, counseling, and probation. Legal outcomes are not neat cures, but they did open the possibility of repair. The mother relocated with her son, changing schools and neighborhoods, trying to stitch together a life where trust could grow slowly. The boy received medical care and counseling, and over time his laughter lost some of its edge. Elena's life resumed its rhythms, though altered. She kept working there for a time, sometimes seeing the boy at weekend visits, sometimes receiving drawings and notes that brightened the days. She took comfort in small recoveries, the boy playing without flinching, reaching for her hand when he needed comfort, falling asleep with his head on her shoulder without clenching. Those small things mattered more than any public recognition. People asked later why she had not told the mother first, or why she had escalated immediately. Elena would say simply that some dangers cannot be paused for deliberation. Notice, ask, document, escalate. Those steps had guided her. The legal system was imperfect, but the child had access to counseling, medical care, and a family who began to ask questions. In a world that often hides its edges, sometimes the careful accumulation of small acts is what keeps a child safe. Years later, Elena would sometimes pass a playground and see a boy who moved with a new ease. Once, on a humid afternoon, he ran past and stopped to wave, then hugged her tight. The sight of him playing freely felt like a small miracle. The phrase that had started everything, "Daddy said it wouldn't hurt," remained with her. It could have been left unchallenged, allowed to calcify into silence. Instead, it became the first ripple of a change. Elena kept a small notebook with the crisis hotline number she had called and a quiet commitment to act if she ever needed to again. She understood that being vigilant can be heavy work, but she also found joy in the ordinary: tidy beds, warm tea, and children who laugh without flinching. In the end, she believed safety was made of many small acts. A question asked, a phone call placed, a steady hand offered without drama. Those things had helped make a home where a child could wake up and simply be a child.